Well, we're glad that you're with us today as we wrap up our series on tensions. Next week, we kick off a brand new series that we're calling Your Red Flag is Showing. Do you know anybody like that their red flag is showing? I'm basing it on your response that yes, that's true. You know a few people that you want to invite to this series, okay? So next week, we're talking about the red flag of anger. Know anybody that struggles with that? Don't elbow anybody. Don't look at anybody. It cause problems before we even get there, you know? Well, we're going to talk about how do we deal with these red flags, not how do we hide them, but how do we actually deal with them through the power of the Holy Spirit. And that kicks off next week. So I can't wait to start that. But today, we're wrapping up this series on tensions. And if you're joining us for the first time, we've been talking about how sometimes in life we feel pulled from one side to the other. And today, we're talking about this tension of kids versus spouse. You ever felt that tension before? On one side, you feel, your kids have these demands, the kids need certain things from you, but then also on this side over here, you feel like your spouse needs certain things from you and you just can't make anybody happy and you're being pulled in two different directions. And what is the proper tension for that? Now, maybe you're single and you're here and you're like, oh, I picked the wrong day to come to church, right? Like, this doesn't apply to me. Well, so if you're single here today, here's what I want to tell you. Like, if you hope at some point in the future to be married, I think this is very, very important for you to understand because many, many people get it wrong and it causes a lot of pain and heartache over their lifetime. But there is a very real tension as we think about our kids, right? And there's a reality in which your kids need you, right? Especially if they're babies or toddlers, that if you don't give them the focus, the attention that they need, that there's a very real sense that they're not going to thrive. But on this side, if you don't give your spouse the attention that they need to help that relationship stay strong, you might end up a single parent, right? So how do we find this tension? And so many times in life, you feel like if you have kids and you're married, you feel like you're like in this like ancient torture device, right? Like where both people are being pulled in two different directions and you can't make anyone happy. It just feels difficult. Well, I mean, it feels like our kids are demanding. It feels like our spouse is demanding. And the truth is, that's a reality. Both are demanding. I mean, wouldn't you agree with me that your spouse is demanding? You're like, that's not safe to answer in church, Pastor. There's no way I'm nodding my head on that one. But here, that's one way to look at it, right? One way to look at it is your spouse is demanding. They want all your time. Your kids are so needy. They want all your time. But of course, the other way to look at it is they love you. They love to spend time with you. They're wanting to be with you more. They love the way that you make them feel. They love the way that you treat them. They just feel better when they're around you. But of course, that doesn't help with the tension all the time. Because you might be saying, have you ever said to your spouse, hey, listen, once we get the kids in bed, you and I will have some us time once we get the kids in bed. Of course, what happens? You each take a kid and then what happens? You fall asleep reading them the Bible story, and like, oh man, all right, well maybe next or tomorrow night we'll try it. So this tension, how do we find the right balance between both of these? Can I suggest to you today that this tension, if you feel it, if you recognize it between your kids and your spouse, I don't know if you've recognized it or not, or if you realize it or not, but this is a recent cultural shift, a recent cultural development. This tension between kids and this tension between your spouse is only happened in Western civilization. It only started about 150 years ago to as soon as 75 years ago. So think about that. 75 years ago is all we've started feeling this tension. And what is this tension? If we were to put a name on it, we would call it the child-centered or the kid-centered family. The kid-centered family. That is a recent development in human history. Now, why is this a recent development in human history? What happened about 75 years ago, 100 years ago? We see this focus of kids getting more attention, being more of the center of the family after World War II. Because what happened? Well, we have the increase in technology, the abundance of food, the rise of the middle class. Because up until this point, what were kids expected of and needed to do? To pitch in, right? Like everybody had a role. Everybody had a responsibility because it was about survival. How do we make sure we have enough food for the family to make it? How do we make sure we have everything together for winter before it hits? But then slowly, because of technology, because of the increase of food, increase of wealth, increase of the middle class, the focus began to change from being survival, and many, many people began putting the focus on their children. And have you ever heard anyone say that before? That the center of their world is what? Their kids. Maybe you've heard people say, my life revolves around my kids. Maybe you've even heard people say, maybe you've even said it yourself, my kids are my world. I've heard men say, the reason that I work so hard, the reason I'm trying to get ahead, the reason I'm trying to provide for my family, I just really want to make sure that my kids have a better life than what I had. And their purpose, their mission, their about everything, the center of their life are their children. Everything revolves around. If you're a single parent, it's even harder. And listen, I recognize that is a very difficult job. You're being mom and you're being dad. And that's hard. That's an extra heavy load to carry. But it's even more important that you pay attention to this tension of not letting your children be the center of your life, the center of your world. And why would I say that? Because what if making your kids the center of your world isn't good for them? And in fact, that's what we're suggesting to you today. It's not good for them to be the center of your world, that everything in your life revolves around them. Now, why would we say that that's not good for them? Have you ever felt the pressure that someone else's emotional well-being was based on you? That's a lot of pressure to feel. That's a lot of pressure for an adult to feel, and that's a lot of pressure for kids to feel. To say that my parents' emotional well-being is based on me. That I have their whole life, their whole existence. I'm the center of their universe. That's a lot of pressure to put on anyone, much less kids. Now, imagine that they were able to survive that kind of pressure. What do you think they would grow up to be or to struggle with? Do you think that a child who has been the center of their universe, the center of their parents' universe, do you think they would struggle with entitlement? Yeah, maybe. Do you think that they would struggle with narcissistic tendencies? To think that everybody should do what I want to do. They should value what I want to do, go where I want to do. So it's not good for your kids to be the center of the universe. It's hard for them. That's too much pressure for them. And it doesn't have their well-being in mind in the future. So if kids aren't to be the center, then maybe you're saying, well, Pastor, does that mean that my spouse is supposed to be the center of my universe, the center of my world? And then, of course, that leads us back to this recent cultural development, this recent cultural shift. Because along with kids becoming the center of the universe, something else has happened in the last 75 to 100 years. And do you know what that is? We have become an extremely secularized society. And do you know what that means? That means we have removed all references of God from the government, from political life, from your work, from the school. There is no mention of God. And so, of course, that leaves us with just these two choices. But what Christians have realized for centuries is that at the center of our life should not be our kids or our spouse, but should be who? God, right? Jesus. He should be the center of our life. But so often, he isn't the center of our life. It's so easy for Jesus to be replaced with either our kids or our spouse. I want to point out something to you in Psalms chapter 22. Psalms 22 is a messianic psalm. Do you know what that means? That means that it foretells about Christ, about the Messiah. And as you read Psalms 22, there's things that David writes about that never happened to him, that foretells us about what would happen to the Messiah. One of them, he talks about his hands and his feet would be pierced. Talks about his clothes, how they would gamble for his clothes and throw dice. Jesus, in fact, quotes from this psalm, Psalm 22, when he's on the cross. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? My God, why have you abandoned me? But for our talk today, I think what's important is what he ends this psalm with in verse 27. He says, the whole earth will acknowledge the Lord and return to him. He's saying the whole world will acknowledge that what's truly at the center, whether they've recognized it or not, it's God. And all the families of the nation will bow down before him. What are nations made up of? Well, they're made up of families. And he's saying if you want God to be at the center of your country, then you want God to be at the center of your family. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. He says, for royal power belongs to the Lord. He rules all the nations. Whether they recognize it or not, God is in charge of who's in charge. God is the one who is sovereign over all the world, all of the nations. Verse 29, he says, let the rich of the earth feast and worship. Bow before him, all who are mortal. And notice this, all whose lives will end as dust. That's a bit sad to think, isn't it? Everything in our life will eventually become dust. We ourselves will eventually become dust. Think about everything you've ever accomplished, everything you've worked so hard for, everything that you've purchased or owned will eventually become dust, forgotten with time, blown with the sands. It's sad to think that maybe your great-grandchildren, maybe even your grandchildren, might not even know who you are. It's a high chance your great-grandchildren will. And everything that you've worked for, it'll just be blown with the dust, forgotten. And you think, well, boy, that's depressing. That's sad. Maybe I should just be a hedonist. Let's just eat and drink and be merry because tomorrow we die. But that's not where it ends. He says, our children will also serve him. Future generations will hear about the wonders of the Lord. He's saying what echoes throughout time, what gets passed on from generation to generation to generation is our faith. With Jesus Christ at the center, with God at the center of our life, that keeps getting passed on to our children, to our grandchildren, to our great-grandchildren, and they begin to serve the Lord. Why? Because they caught it. The most important things in life are not taught that they are caught. They saw mom and dad do it, so the children did it. So then the grandchildren begin to do it. And for many of you, you're the first generation in your family to become a follower of Christ. And because of you, your children will serve Christ. Your grandchildren will serve Christ. Why? Because you put them on a different path. It's the center of you. Now notice what he says here. It says, our children will also serve him. Also is the key word. It assumes that mom and dad are serving Christ. It assumes that at the center of mom and dad's life is what? Is God. It's kind of crazy to think that my kids will grow up and value faith if mom and dad don't. It's kind of crazy to think God will be first place in my kid's life if it's not first place in my life. He says, our children will also serve him. Future generations will hear about the wonders of the Lord. Verse 31, his righteous acts will be told to those not yet born. To your grandchildren who aren't born, to your great-grandchildren, to your great-great-grandchildren, they will hear about the Lord. Why? Because of you putting Jesus at the center of your life. They will hear about everything he has done. Can I suggest to you today, we all want that, right? We all want that picture of the future. We all want our great-grandchildren to know and love Jesus as we love Jesus today. But can I suggest to you today, you can't say that God comes first when really your children come first. And you know, I've been a pastor for a couple of decades now. Almost every year I'll have someone come up to me and they're like, hey, pastor, I just want to let you know we're not mad. That's a weird way to start a conversation, right? We're not mad about anything, but you're just not going to see us for the next couple of months. I'm like, oh, well, what's happening? You going down south? And they're like, no, it's soccer season. I'm thinking, isn't it always soccer season? But anyway, they're like, it's soccer, so we're going to be traveling and stuff. So just don't worry, nothing's wrong. You know, we're just busy. Can I tell you, if that's your life, can I suggest to you that what's at the center of your life is not God? That what's at the center of your life is your children and their sports, so that is what everything else is revolving around. Instead of saying, no, sorry, we're going to miss that one. Because why? God is at the center of our life. For so many of us, God is just something that we're trying to squeeze and shoehorn into our life to just say, all right, let's make this work. I think we can, with all the other things we got going on today, I think we got a little bit of time for Jesus. Instead of saying, how instead do we make our entire life, our entire calendar, our entire schedule revolve around the things of God, the people of God, the place of God, God's word in our life, instead of it having the leftovers? For us and our children to follow Christ, it requires a mom and a dad to decide to follow Christ, that he is first place in their life. Now listen, there's nothing wrong with sports. Don't hear me say that. I think that they're an important part of childhood and growing up. But can I tell you this? They make a poor center for a kid's life. Because what happens when they can no longer play because of health issues, or they get cut from a team, or they graduate from high school or college, and what has been such a center focus of their life is gone. It's just totally gone. Then I've seen kids just be aimless. They just wander around. I don't know, I just feel lost because why? They lost the center of their life. The only thing that can never be taken away as the center is God, to say that Jesus is at the center of my life. Now, sometimes parents will say, well, Pastor, I just don't want to force my kids to go to church. You know, I was forced growing up and I don't want them to feel the same way that I felt about church. Let me ask you this. Do you force your kids to go to school? Yeah. Why? Well, it's good for them. And the same thing with church. Let me ask you this. Do you let your kids decide whether or not they'll eat their vegetables? No. You make them eat their vegetables. Why? It's good for them. Do you let your kids decide whether or not they're going to brush their teeth? No. Why? Because it's good for them. And what we can unintentionally say to our kids is that vegetables are optional. Vegetables are mandatory, but God is optional. We can say to them, brushing your teeth is mandatory, but God is optional. Only if you really want to or need to. What does that communicate to our children? Well, what unintentionally it tells them is they are the decider, the arbitrator, the king of their own life, because they get to decide whether or not God is a place in their life. Instead to say, hey, we think that God is important. That's a surefire way to make sure that your grandchildren or your great children don't love Jesus, is to be casual about your faith, to be casual in how you follow Jesus. Because if it's not a priority to you, if it's not center for your life, it will not be center for your kids. So what's at the center of your life? I think you owe it to yourself to say that. For some people, it's their children. Their children, and then what happens, of course, when the children graduate? What happens when the children move away? What happens? Where is your center? And so many parents lose that. For some people, it's their job is the center of their life. For some, it's their accomplishment or success or money. What does it look like to have Jesus at the center? For Jesus to be the thing that is the most important for you. To say above everything else, my life doesn't revolve around my kids, and it also doesn't revolve around me or my work or my spouse. It revolves around Jesus. Now maybe you're here and you're saying, all right, well, Pastor, I get what you're saying here, that maybe in our society, in our culture, we have put an unhealthy focus on this tension on this side over here with our kids. But what is my spouse's role in all of this? Are you saying that my spouse should be maybe the focus, or maybe you should say the spouses should be the center of my life? If you think that, I'm not sure you've been listening, okay? Because we're saying what should be the center? Jesus should be the center. But what is our spouse's role? And one of the things that we see from our scriptures is we see that there's a flow, not a hierarchy, but we see that there's a flow. With Jesus being at the center, then certain relationships flow out of that. Now, in Ephesians chapter 5 and Ephesians chapter 6, I want to encourage you, if you've got a Bible, open it up to Ephesians 5 and chapter 6. I want you to see the big headings. Or if you got your phone, you can open up the Bible app. And then I want you to see Ephesians 5, verse 6. And I want you to look at verse 21 here. In verse 21, you'll see that there's some big chapter headings or section headings about what Paul is talking about. And he's talking about this flow. And as you scroll through it, you'll see some important things. The first thing you see him addressing is husbands and wives. You see him first talking about in chapter 21 about mutual submission to each other. Then he addresses wives. Then he addresses husbands. Then out of that, he addresses children. And then out of children, he addresses the work relationship. So what is this flow with Jesus at the center? With Jesus at the center, we see then it flows to your husband and wife relationship. Then we see it flowing to the children. And then we see it flowing to our work relationship. And in fact, he ends this section talking about the children flowing out of the spousal relationship by saying, dads. He addresses dads. And notice what he says here in verse 4. He says this, he says, fathers, don't provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from what? The Lord. He's saying you're pointing them back to God being at the center of their life. What's at the center? It's the Lord. It's Jesus, the Christ. That's what we're pointing our kids back to. So it flows out, this relationship. How does it fit with our spouse? It flows out of Jesus being at the center. Let me ask you this, a little Bible trivia for you. What was the very first human relationship? Remember what their names were, the very first humans that were created? Adam and Eve. Okay, good. You did okay with that. All right, it's Adam and Eve. Now think about this. The very first created humans, a husband and a wife. Isn't that interesting? I find that so fascinating to me. It wasn't two friends. Isn't that interesting? It wasn't a parent and a child. It wasn't like a big human and a little human. It was a husband and a wife. The very first human relationship that we see. We see that God formed what? A family. And in Genesis 2 and verse 24, Moses is giving us his summary of this, of marriage. And he's talking about this and he's saying, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother, he leaves his family and is joined to his wife, and the two are united as one or become one flesh. He's talking about here that they're creating their own family, that the children are flowing out of this covenant that they are making to each other, that the children aren't the covenant, but the children are coming out of the covenant. Maybe we could say it this way. Kids are a temporary member of your home. Your spouse is a lifetime founding member. Lifetime. Like, don't remind me. But no, lifetime founding member. Your kids are temporary. And now some of you, especially, you got kids at home and you're like, Pastor, it doesn't feel temporary. They've been there for a couple decades, I was like, tell me when the temporary is gonna end, We've got them, they've been there like 25 years, 26 years. This is going on a long time. Trust me. Eventually, it will be temporary. My wife and I, we still have kids at home, and so I certainly understand that tension. But there was a couple weeks this summer where no kids were going to be at home. Can I tell you, I was a little nervous about that. I seriously, I was nervous. Like, would she still like me? I was nervous. Like, do we have anything in common anymore? Because a lot of your married life does what? It revolves around your kids. Like, who's taking here? You're dividing the labor, and this kid has a doctor's appointment, and this kid's going to this place, and this birthday party, and all those kinds of things. And you kind of you think you're doing the right kind of things, but you won't know until you become an empty nester. And I'm like, oh, would we even like that? Because kids have been such a part of our world. So I was a little nervous. I was nervous, like, is she gonna go to one room of the house and, watch her shows? And I'm gonna go to another room of the house and watch a show? So I was kind of nervous. I'm just happy to report we still like each other. We love each other. And we were both like, at the end, we were like, I think we're gonna love being empty nesters. This is gonna be awesome, right? And you forget in the midst of all the childhood life, and it's so easy in those decades for the kids to be the center. Instead of recognizing, listen, the kids are a gift. They're not the glue that keep us together. And if you forget that, well, when the kids are gone, what happens to us? The kids were the result of the promise, the covenant that you made to God and to each other. The kids aren't the promise. So there's what flows out of that relationship with God being at the center, with Christ being at the center. Then it flows out to your spouse. Then it flows out to your kids. You know, a kid-centric family is so dysfunctional. We see this happening in Genesis. In fact, in Genesis chapter 25, I want to ask you this. First of all, do you know who Abraham was? Does that name sound familiar? Abraham had a son. Do you know what his name was? Isaac. Good job. And then Isaac had two twin sons. You know what their name was? Jake. That's right. Esau and Jacob. All right. We're doing much better. We struggled with Adam and Eve. We did better with this. All right. So that's good. So Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve. We got Jacob and Esau. And here's one of the saddest verses here. In verse 28, verse 28 of Genesis 25. The father had his favorite, Esau. And the mom had her favorite, which was Jacob. A kid-centered family. And it split the family. It created so much dysfunction. In fact, Esau hated his brother Jacob so much that he wanted to kill him. And you read about it in Genesis. In fact, anytime I would encourage you feel bad about your family, just start reading through Genesis and you're like, my family's not that bad. We're not that messed up. I mean, these are some messed up people. And these are like the patriarchs of the faith, you know what I'm saying? And you're like, okay, all right, we're not doing as bad as I thought we were. So here's what I want to ask you. 3 questions as we wrap up. What can you do to strengthen your marriage? What could you do to strengthen your marriage? When was the last time you went on a date? Maybe say last night. That's good. When's the next one? When's the next one? When was the last time you were one flesh, as the Bible says, if you know what I mean, in the biblical sense? That's a gift that God gives to you to only be enjoyed in the bounds of marriage. What if in your family, in your home, in your marriage, with your spouse, you asked this question, would you, before you added anything else to your schedule, what if you said, will this draw us closer or spread us thinner? Before we say yes to one more sport, one more activity, one more birthday party, to say, this can't be the center of our universe. This can't be the center of our life. It's just running our kids all around. We don't even have time to be a family. We don't even have time to practice the things of God, to learn the things of God, to do the things of God, because we're running, trying to accomplish all of these other things. And so maybe we just need to press pause. Here's the other question I want to ask you. Do you model serving Jesus to your kids? Remember what we talked about? We said our children will also serve him. That's what Psalms 22 and verse 30 says. We have that in Kids Check-In. Our kids will also serve him. That's just a declaration of our faith, claiming that in faith, this promise that God has given us, that our children will also serve him. But of course, the key word is, that assumes that a mom and dad have at the center of their life, the center of their world, Christ. Not success, not money, not job, not sports, but Christ. What would it look like for you to do that? Now listen, many of you get this. I mean, that's why you're at church here today. You want Jesus to be the center of your family. I know I'm preaching to the choir on this, but here's what I want to encourage you to take another step. And that other step is, are you serving anywhere in this church family? Just as in your home with your kids, you wouldn't let just one kid do all the chores around the house and the other one play video games. You know, that wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be a healthy family. That would create all kinds of resentment and problems and dysfunction. You say, no, everyone has a role. We all pitch in. And that's what I believe about you, is that God brought you here because you have a role to pitch in and play. And what a powerful thing to show your kids, for them to see, not only do we come and receive, but we also come and give. That God has given us talents and abilities to use, not just to make money for our family, but also to serve God's kingdom, to serve the people who are sitting next to you, the family of God. Can I tell you that we need you? In a very real way, we need you at our 1:00 service as we get ready to launch that. What an exciting time for us to do that as a church. You heard Pastor Chad share that with you, that we have at the 10 o'clock service, We have over 100 high schoolers, 9th through 12th grade, that come to that service. That's just amazing. We don't have room for any more. Of course, our option is, as he shared with you, we can build a new building for $15 million. So if you have that, please talk to me afterwards and we'll work on that. We'll make that happen in a couple of years. It's gonna take a couple of years to go through. You know how hard it was to get parking, right? Can you imagine another building? So go through that. Or we just tell people they can't come anymore. Wow. Or 3, we start another service which is not convenient for anybody, right? It's not convenient if you have high school kids to have your 9th and 10th graders at 10 o'clock and then the 11th and 12th graders at 1. That's not convenient. But it's our assignment to make room for others. Someone said, Pastor, I'm a little worried about you doing 5 services. I'm like, I'm worried about me too. Like I am. I'm like, I don't know. But listen, you know what I think about? There are pastors in China, Iran, Somalia, Afghanistan, who are in prison, tortured, executed, maybe even their family killed. That's their assignment for Christ. And one day, I'm gonna have to stand behind them in the judgment line. And Jesus was like, you complained about your assignment? And I think, wow, if my assignment is to preach 5 messages and live in a middle-class community, that's not so bad compared to the other people's assignments. And if God's assignment for you is to live in this community and to serve others, to make a little bit of inconvenience, that's not such a bad deal, is it? To know that Jesus is working in your church. Jesus is working in your community. You ever seen that movie, Jesus Revolution? Well, I cried like a baby when I watched that thing. Sometimes I hear people say, boy, I wish I could have lived through a time like that. Boy, what must that have been like? Can I tell you just humbly, in a very small way, that Jesus is doing that right now in your church? Isn't that a beautiful thing to think that in your lifetime, in New York, of all places, you get to see God, his church. Yeah, amen. All glory to him. But we get to see Jesus's church increase and not decrease. We get to see every single week people give their life to Christ. Every single week they put their faith and trust in him. I know you only get to see your service and the service that you attend, but the other services that I'm a part of, it's just so unbelievable to see what God is doing. And I believe that God has brought you here for such a time as this, for such a season as this. And so I want to ask you, would you model for your children what it looks like, not just to receive, but also to give? And you can go out to our to Info Central and sign up, or you can scan the QR code behind me. Now here's the last question I want to ask you. Is Jesus, this is the most important question, is Jesus the center of your life? Now some of you, you've been coming for weeks, maybe even years. You come just to keep peace in your family. That's a respectable thing. But can I tell you, the most important decision you'll ever make in your life, the thing that you feel like you're missing, that nothing in your life ever seems to satisfy or to fill that void, is Jesus himself. And that Jesus has been calling you. Jesus has been reaching out to you. Jesus has rearranged all of the events of your life to get you here right now, to tell you once again, that he loves you. To remind you once again that he sent his one and only son to die on the cross for you. And the most important decision you will ever make in your life is to make Jesus the center. And you say, how do I do that? Well, you say, Jesus, I'm a sinner. Forgive me. I need you to come into my life to make all things new. You say, Jesus, I believe you are who you said you are. The way, the truth, the life, the only way to the Father. For some of you today, I'm convinced today is the day of salvation for you. So let's pray together. Today, maybe as a mom or a dad, you recognize that Jesus isn't the center. Would you just say, God, forgive me? God, thank you for my kids. They're such a gift to me. But God, I recognize they were never meant to be the center. They were never meant to be what my entire world revolves around. It's not good for them, and it's not good for me. Would you say, Jesus, I want it to flow out. I need to make more time for this spouse that I've made a covenant to you and to them. And I want to honor that. God, I want that when our children leave our home, there's such a strong relationship between me and my spouse, that we continue to serve you and love you. Maybe some of you need to say, God, forgive me. I don't even have time to volunteer or serve or to help your church or your people or your kingdom because I'm so busy building my kingdom. So Jesus, I want to change that today. And lastly, some of you, today is your day of salvation. Today is the day where you step across that line of faith. Today is the day where you say, Jesus, I'm ready. Jesus, I need you to forgive me of my sins. If you're ready today to make that decision, to put your faith and trust in Christ, would you just raise your hands right now? I just want to see it. Listen, you're in a room full of Christians. We're going to cheer for you. You're in a room full of Christians. We're going to be excited for you. I see that. I see 3 hands that are raised. Can we clap for them today? Can we celebrate that? Here's what I want to ask you to do. This next step is really bold. It's a big step. If you raised your hand, I want to ask you to come forward in just a moment when we sing. And I know that might seem very scary for you. But we want to pray with you. In fact, I'm going to be up here. I want to meet you. I want to pray with you as you decide to follow Christ. I know that may seem a bit scary, but again, I want to remind you, you're in a room full of Christians who are excited about that, who made that same decision themselves and want to cheer for you. So let's stand together right now. And if you raised your hand as we sing, I want you to start coming forward right now.